The rain drummed against my windshield, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. My fingers clutched the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the cheap wedding ring on my left hand catching the dim glow from the dashboard. I was exhausted, bone deep, soul-crushing exhausted. Mike hadn't come home again last night, and his excuses were wearing thin as the threads of our 3-year marriage. "Mommy, are we there yet?" Emma's sleepy voice drifted from the back seat, her reflection in the rearview mirror showing drooping eyelids fighting against sleep. At 4 years old, she shouldn't have to witness her mother's silent breakdown at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Almost, baby. Just a few more minutes." I forced a smile into my voice that never reached my eyes. I pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Apartments, a name that suggested romance and comfort, but delivered only peeling paint and unreliable heating. Home, sweet home. The kind of place you end up when your husband gambles away the rent money and your waitressing job barely covers childcare. I gathered my sleeping daughter in my arms, her warm weight against my chest, the only thing keeping me anchored to this world. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I fumbled with the keys to our apartment. Probably Mike with another excuse. I shifted Emma to my hip, her small head lolling against my shoulder, and managed to unlock the door before checking the message. "Where's the money, Mike? You promised payment today. Last chance." My stomach clenched. This wasn't the first threatening message I'd seen on Mike's phone, but it was the first sent directly to me. I stared at the unfamiliar number with an area code I didn't recognize. Wrong number, obviously, but the coincidence made my skin crawl. After tucking Emma into bed and kissing her forehead, I collapsed onto our threadbare couch, phone in hand. Mike wasn't answering my calls, again. I chewed my lower lip, staring at the threatening text. A thought, dangerous and desperate, formed in my mind. Maybe I could find out who Mike owed money to. Maybe I could fix this. My thumbs hovered over the screen before typing. This isn't Mike. I'm his wife. He's not here right now. How much does he owe you? I pressed send before I could reconsider, immediately regretting my impulsiveness. What was I thinking? People who sent messages like this weren't the kind you engaged with. I tossed the phone aside, burying my face in my hands. The silence of the apartment pressed in around me, broken only by the occasional car passing outside and the hum of the ancient refrigerator. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I snatched it up, heart racing. Interesting. $75,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $75,000? Impossible. We didn't have that kind of money. We didn't know anyone with that kind of money. I typed back with trembling fingers. There must be some mistake. We don't have that kind of money. We can barely make rent. The response came quickly. No mistake. Your husband knows exactly what he did. I stared at those words, feeling the floor shift beneath me. What had Mike done? The gambling I knew about, but this suggested something far worse. Please, I typed, desperation overriding common sense. I have a daughter. We have nothing. Minutes passed with no response. I paced our small living room, gnawing at my thumbnail, a nervous habit from childhood. Outside, rain continued to fall, and somewhere a car alarm started wailing. At 12:17 a.m., the phone buzzed again. Address. Just one word. A command, not a request. I hesitated, every warning bell in my head clanging at full volume. Giving our address to whoever this was would be beyond stupid, but what choice did I have? If Mike owed these people money, they'd find us anyway. I sent our address, immediately switching off all the lights except a small lamp. I peered through the blinds at the empty parking lot below. What had I done? 23 minutes later, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the lot. Even in the dim glow of the streetlights, I could see it was expensive, the kind of vehicle that had no business in this neighborhood. The engine shut off, but nobody emerged. My phone buzzed. Come down. Alone. Fear shot through me, sharp and cold. I glanced at Emma's bedroom door. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the nightmare unfolding. I couldn't leave her alone, but I couldn't ignore this either. Whatever mess Mike had created was now at our doorstep. I called Mrs. Patel next door, the only neighbor I trusted. Despite the hour, she answered and agreed to listen for Emma through our thin, shared wall. I changed quickly into jeans and a sweater, ran a brush through my tangled hair, and applied lip balm to my chapped lips. A pointless attempt at dignity. The elevator was broken again, so I took the stairs, my heart thundering with each step down 4 flights. The lobby was empty and dimly lit. Through the glass doors, I could see the black SUV waiting, engine off, windows revealing nothing. I pushed through the doors, the cold night air raising goosebumps on my arms. For a long moment, I stood there, rain soaking through my thin sweater. Then the back door of the SUV opened. I approached slowly, like a deer sensing a predator. As I reached the vehicle, I caught a glimpse of the interior. Leather seats. A man in a dark suit sitting in the shadows. Not his face, just his hands. Strong, with an expensive watch gleaming on his wrist and a signet ring on his pinky finger. "Get in." The voice was deep, accented slightly. Italian maybe, or Mediterranean of some kind. It wasn't loud, but it carried authority that made my spine straighten. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "We can talk here." A soft chuckle from the shadows. Brave. Foolish, but brave. He leaned forward slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his face. Strong jawline, 5 o'clock shadow, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the minimal light rather than reflect it. "Your husband stole from me, not just money. Information, names, that makes him a liability." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the rain. "I don't know anything about that. We're separated. He doesn't live here anymore." The lie came easily. "I know exactly where your husband is," he replied. "The question is, what am I going to do about his wife and daughter?" At the mention of Emma, something fierce and protective roared to life inside me. "Leave my daughter out of this." He studied me for a moment, and I felt exposed, as if he could see every fear, every weakness, every sleepless night. "What's your name?" "Olivia," I answered, not seeing any reason to lie. "Well, Olivia," he said my name slowly, as if tasting it, "you've created an interesting situation by contacting me directly. Now we need to discuss how we move forward." "There's nothing to discuss. I can't give you what I don't have." "Get in the car, Olivia. It's raining and this conversation requires privacy." When I hesitated, he added, "If I wanted to harm you, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Logic told me to run, to grab Emma and flee. But to where? With what money? If this man knew where we lived, he could find us anywhere, and something in his voice, controlled, measured, told me he wasn't lying. If he'd wanted to hurt us, he would have already. I slid into the back seat, leaving the door open, my only concession to self-preservation. The interior smelled of expensive leather and a subtle cologne that was oddly comforting. The man beside me was older than I'd initially thought, maybe early 40s, with salt and pepper at his temples. His suit probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. "My name is Alessandro Russo," he said, watching my face carefully. "Your husband worked for one of my businesses. He had access to sensitive information, which he sold to competitors. The money is secondary to the breach of trust." "I don't believe you," I said automatically, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. Mike had always been secretive about his work, claiming he did consulting, but never explaining what that entailed. The gambling, the late nights, the unexplained cash that sometimes appeared and quickly disappeared. It all suddenly made terrible sense. "You do believe me," Alessandro said quietly. "I can see it in your eyes. You've suspected for some time that your husband isn't the man you thought you married." Tears stung my eyes, and I blinked them back furiously. "What do you want from me?" "Information. Where is he hiding? Who has he contacted? What has he told you?" "Nothing," I said truthfully. "He tells me nothing. He comes home late, if at all. I stopped, not wanting to air my marital problems to this stranger. "I can't help you." Alessandro studied me in silence, his gaze moving over my face, down to my trembling hands, and back up. "You have a child to protect. I respect that. Here's what's going to happen. You'll come work for me." "What?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Your husband disappeared with my property. You'll help me recover it by working at my restaurant. You'll have access to people who might contact him, and you'll report anything you learn directly to me." You want me to be your spy? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. I want you to pay your husband's debt in a way that doesn't involve more traditional methods. His voice remained calm, but the implied threat was clear. And if I refuse? Alessandro leaned back, his face once again in shadow. You won't. The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. He was right. I wouldn't refuse. Not when Emma's safety was at stake. When do I start? I asked, resignation coloring my tone. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. The address will be sent to your phone. He reached out and handed me a business card with just a phone number embossed in silver. If your husband contacts you, you call this number immediately. I took the card, our fingers brushing momentarily. His hand was warm despite the cool air. How do you know I won't just take my daughter and run? Alessandro smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features and reached his eyes. It was more terrifying than his threats. Because you're smart, Olivia, and because I'll know if you try. As if on cue, the driver's door opened, and a mountain of a man stepped out, circled the car, and opened my door wider. A clear dismissal. One more thing, Alessandro said as I moved to leave. Don't attempt to contact the police. It would be unfortunate for everyone involved. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I stepped out of the car, he called after me. Your daughter. What's her name? I froze, torn between protecting Emma by keeping her name secret and fearing what refusing to answer might provoke. Emma, I said finally. Her name is Emma. A beautiful name. Alessandro replied. Make sure she's taken care of tomorrow night. A babysitter I can verify. I'll have someone pick you up. Before I could respond, the door closed and the SUV pulled away, leaving me standing in the rain, clutching a business card and wondering if I'd just made a deal with the devil himself. I took the stairs back to the apartment slowly, legs shaking with delayed adrenaline. Mrs. Patel was waiting outside my door, concern etched into her kind face. Everything okay, dear? She asked, eyeing my rain-soaked clothes. Yes, I lied, forcing a smile. Just a misunderstanding with a friend. Thank you for listening for Emma. After she left, I checked on my daughter, still sleeping peacefully, curls splayed across her pillow. I sank to the floor beside her bed, silent tears streaming down my face. What had Mike gotten us into, and what was I going to do now? My phone buzzed with a text message from the same unknown number. 7 p.m. tomorrow. Car will arrive at 6:30. Wear black. I rested my head against the wall, listening to my daughter's steady breathing and the continued pattering of rain against the windows. In the span of a single hour, my life had changed irrevocably. I was now entangled with a dangerous man who clearly ran in circles I couldn't begin to comprehend. A man who, despite his politeness, had threatened my family. A man whose dark eyes had seen right through me. And tomorrow, I would begin working for him. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains and illuminating the living room where I'd eventually collapsed on the couch. I hadn't slept more than an hour or two, my mind racing with questions and fears. What kind of restaurant would a man like Alessandro Russo own? What exactly would my job entail? And most importantly, where was Mike, and what had he done? Emma's cheerful voice calling, "Mommy," pulled me from my thoughts. I plastered on a smile and went through our morning routine. Breakfast, getting her dressed for preschool, packing her lunch, all while feeling like I was moving underwater. "Are you sick?" Emma asked, her small hand reaching up to touch my cheek. "Your eyes look funny." "Just tired, sweetie," I assured her, kneeling to zip up her jacket. Mommy didn't sleep well. After dropping Emma off, I called in sick to the diner where I worked. Losing a day's wages would hurt, but I needed time to prepare for whatever awaited me that evening. I spent the morning calling every contact in my phone who might have heard from Mike. No one had seen him in days. By afternoon, panic had settled into a dull, persistent ache in my chest. I arranged for Mrs. Patel to watch Emma, simply telling her I'd been offered an evening shift at a new restaurant. Then I stood before my closet, staring at my limited wardrobe. "Wear black," the text had said. I pulled out my only black dress, a simple sheath I'd worn to a funeral last year, and a pair of scuffed black heels. At 6:29 p.m. my phone buzzed. Car outside. I checked my appearance one last time in the bathroom mirror. I'd applied makeup with a careful hand. Enough to look professional, but not enough to suggest I was trying too hard. My auburn hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and small silver earrings were my only adornment. The woman in the mirror looked composed, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "Be good for Mrs. Patel," I told Emma, kissing the top of her head. "Mommy will be back late, so I'll see you in the morning." "Bring me a surprise?" she asked hopefully. I forced a smile. "We'll see." The black SUV from last night was idling at the curb, though Alessandro wasn't inside. Instead, the driver, the same mountain of a man, nodded curtly as I slid into the back seat. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled away. "Little Italy," he replied, his deep voice startling after his previous silence. "The Crimson." I'd heard of the Crimson, of course. It was one of those exclusive restaurants you read about in magazines. Impossible to get reservations, frequented by celebrities and the city's elite. What I hadn't known was that Alessandro Russo owned it. The drive took 30 minutes, carrying us from my neighborhood of discount stores and pawn shops to the glittering heart of downtown. When we arrived, the driver bypassed the main entrance and took me through a side door that led directly to an office. Alessandro was waiting, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that made mine look like the bargain rack special it was. He looked up from his desk, his dark eyes assessing me with that same penetrating gaze that had unsettled me the night before. "Olivia," he said, rising to his feet with fluid grace, "you look appropriate." Not a compliment, just an observation. I bit back a sarcastic reply. "Your role is simple," Alessandro continued, circling his desk to stand before me. "You'll work as a hostess, greet guests, take coats, escort them to tables. The real purpose, however, is to observe and report. My restaurant attracts a particular clientele. Some of them may have had dealings with your husband. And if I see someone who knows Mike," I asked, "you say nothing to them. You tell me. That's all." His tone left no room for questions. "Marco will show you the dining room and introduce you to Sophia, the head hostess. You'll follow her instructions." The mountain man, Marco, appeared at the door, and I realized Alessandro was dismissing me. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Olivia." I looked back, meeting his gaze. "Don't disappoint me." Those 4 words carried more weight than any threat could have. The restaurant was stunning, all crimson velvet and dark wood, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the intimate space. Sophia, a tall, elegant woman with a perfect blonde chignon, eyed me with poorly disguised suspicion. "Mr. Russo doesn't usually hire staff personally," she remarked, as she showed me the reservation system. "You must have impressed him." The insinuation was clear in her tone. I straightened my spine. "I'm just here to work," I replied evenly. Sophia raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, but said nothing more. The evening passed in a blur of faces and names I struggled to remember. I smiled, took coats, led guests to tables, all while scanning for anyone who might have a connection to Mike. By 11, my feet were screaming in the cheap heels, and my face ached from maintaining a pleasant expression. I was returning from seating a late arrival when I spotted a familiar face at the bar. Jason Miller, one of Mike's poker buddies. My heart stuttered in my chest. Jason was deep in conversation with a man whose back was to me, their heads bent close together. I slipped into the hallway leading to Alessandro's office, my mind racing. This was it. The first real connection to Mike. Before I could knock, the door opened, and Alessandro stood there, as if he'd been expecting me. "You found something," he said, gesturing me inside. I stepped past him, hyper-aware of his proximity and the subtle scent of his cologne. "Jason Miller is at the bar. He plays poker with Mike sometimes." Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a predatory focus that made my skin prickle. "Good. Return to your post. Marco will handle Mr. Miller. What are you going to do to him?" I asked, sudden concern for Jason overriding my fear. Alessandro tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Worried about your husband's friend?" "He's just a guy who plays cards. He might not know anything." "Then he has nothing to worry about," Alessandro replied smoothly. "Go back to work, Olivia." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in my mind all day. What did Mike steal from you, exactly? For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, your husband accessed my private files. Client lists. Business arrangements. Names of people who prefer to remain anonymous. And then he tried to sell this information to competitors. Why would he do that? He's reckless and selfish, but he's not... I couldn't finish the sentence. Not what? Not a thief? Not a man who would betray his employer? Alessandro stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head to maintain eye contact. You don't know your husband as well as you think, Olivia. The truth of his words stung. Did I really know Mike at all? The man who'd charmed me 5 years ago with his easy smile and grand promises now seemed like a stranger. Go back to work, Alessandro said, more gently this time. We'll discuss this later. I returned to the hostess stand, my mind churning. From my position, I could see Marco approach Jason at the bar. They spoke briefly. Then Jason followed Marco toward the back of the restaurant. The man Jason had been speaking with remained at the bar, seemingly unconcerned. An hour later, as the restaurant was emptying, Sophia informed me that Mr. Russo wanted to see me in his office. My pulse quickened. Had they learned something from Jason? This time, Alessandro wasn't alone. Jason sat in a chair across from the desk, his face pale, a sheen of sweat on his brow. Marco stood by the door, arms crossed over his massive chest. Sit down, Olivia, Alessandro said, indicating a second chair. I perched on the edge of the seat, avoiding Jason's startled gaze. Mr. Miller has been most cooperative, Alessandro continued, his tone conversational. He hasn't seen your husband in over a week, but he did mention something interesting. He nodded to Jason, clearly a command to speak. Jason swallowed hard. Mike called me 3 days ago, said he was in trouble and needed a place to crash. I told him no way. I've got a family, you know. He sounded desperate. Mentioned something about having information that could set him up for life. Did he say where he was? I asked. Jason shook his head. Nah, but he mentioned heading south. Said something about Miami being nice this time of year. Alessandro and I exchanged a glance. It wasn't much, but it was something. You can go, Mr. Miller, Alessandro said. But remember our discussion, not a word to anyone. Jason practically ran from the room, not even acknowledging me on his way out. After Marco escorted him to the exit, Alessandro turned his attention to me. You did well tonight, he said, surprising me with what sounded like genuine approval. I just saw someone I recognized. Many would have remained silent, hoping to protect their spouse. He leaned back in his chair, watching me with that unnerving intensity. You're more pragmatic than I expected. I'm not protecting Mike, I said flatly. I'm protecting my daughter. A smile touched his lips, as you should. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the desk toward me. Your payment for tonight. I hesitated before taking it. I thought I was working to pay off Mike's debt. You are. But you still need to live, and your daughter needs to eat. When I still didn't take the envelope, he added, Consider it an advance. You'll work 5 nights a week, starting tomorrow. 5 nights a week? I can't, I protested. My daughter will be well cared for, he interrupted. I've arranged for a nanny. Mrs. Garcia is experienced and comes highly recommended. I stared at him, stunned by his presumption. You can't just arrange a nanny for my child without consulting me. I just did. His tone was matter of fact. She'll arrive at your apartment tomorrow at 5 p.m. You can meet her then. And if I refuse? Alessandro's expression hardened. Don't test me, Olivia. I'm being far more accommodating than the situation warrants. The unspoken threat hung in the air between us. I took the envelope, my fingers brushing his. Again, that momentary contact sent an inexplicable current through me, a sensation I immediately suppressed. Marco will take you home, Alessandro said, rising from his chair. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. As I stood to leave, he added, The dress. It's adequate for tonight, but not for regular use. There's a boutique 3 blocks from your apartment. They're expecting you tomorrow morning. A few appropriate outfits have been set aside. I can dress myself, I said stiffly. Of course you can, but the image of the crimson must be maintained. His eyes traveled over me in a way that wasn't exactly inappropriate, but still made me feel exposed. Consider it another advance against your husband's debt. The boutique was nothing like the discount stores I usually shopped at. The sales associate, a willowy woman with impeccable taste, had indeed been expecting me. 4 black dresses, each more elegant than anything I'd ever owned, hung in a private dressing room, along with 2 pairs of genuine leather heels. Mr. Russo specified these items personally. She informed me with a knowing smile that made my cheeks burn. I wanted to tell her it wasn't like that. But what was it like? I was working for a man who was clearly involved in organized crime, a man who had threatened my family, a man who now seemed determined to dress me like a doll. I tried on each dress, hating how good they made me look, how the expensive fabric skimmed my body in all the right places. The sales associate nodded approvingly as I emerged in the final one, a sleek, long-sleeved sheath with a subtle split up one side. "This one is perfect," she declared. "Mr. Russo has excellent taste." The thought of Alessandro personally selecting these dresses, imagining me in them, sent a confusing mixture of indignation and something else, something I refused to acknowledge, coursing through me. I left the boutique with the dresses and shoes in garment bags, feeling like I'd somehow crossed another line. Mrs. Garcia arrived precisely at 5 p.m., a plump, grandmotherly woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. To my surprise, Emma took to her immediately, especially when Mrs. Garcia produced a small stuffed bear from her bag. "Mr. Russo said you have a little girl who might need a friend," she explained, her accent thick but her English clear. I watched them together for half an hour before reluctantly admitting that Alessandro had, once again, made arrangements that were difficult to refuse. Mrs. Garcia seemed genuinely good with children, and her references, which she provided without my asking, were impeccable. "I've worked for Mr. Russo's family for many years," she told me as I prepared to leave, "since his nephew was born. You can trust me with your little one." I wondered what kind of man inspired such loyalty, such confidence. The Alessandro Russo I'd met was dangerous, controlling, and yet there was something else there. A code of sorts, perhaps, a strange sense of honor. I arrived at the Crimson in one of my new dresses, feeling like an imposter. Sophia gave me an appraising look, nodding slightly as if I'd finally met some unspoken standard. The evening proceeded much like the previous one, except this time I noticed more details. The way certain guests were escorted directly to Alessandro's table in the corner, the subtle security presence throughout the restaurant, the respectful deference everyone showed to Alessandro himself. He dined with various associates throughout the evening, always watching the room, occasionally catching my eye across the space. Each time our gazes met, I quickly looked away, unsettled by the jolt of awareness that passed between us. Near closing time, a commotion at the front door drew my attention. A woman, beautiful, expensively dressed, clearly intoxicated, was arguing with Sophia. "I don't care if he's busy," she slurred, her voice carrying across the now quiet restaurant. "Tell Alessandro that Vanessa is here." Alessandro appeared as if summoned, his face impassive. "Vanessa, this isn't a good time." "It's never a good time anymore, is it?" The woman, Vanessa, said bitterly. Her gaze swept the restaurant and landed on me. "Is she the reason? Another of your charity cases?" I froze, mortified to be the center of attention. Alessandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Marco," he said quietly, and his ever-present security man materialized beside Vanessa. "Come, Miss Vanessa," Marco said, gently but firmly taking her arm. "I'll have a driver take you home." "Don't bother," she spat, jerking away from him. "I know when I'm not wanted." She cast one more venomous look in my direction before storming out. Alessandro turned to me. "My office." Now, I followed him, confused and embarrassed. Had I done something wrong? Was I somehow responsible for that scene? Once inside his office, Alessandro closed the door and poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "Ignore Vanessa. She's an old friend who occasionally forgets boundaries." She seemed to think I trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "My lover," Alessandro supplied, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, Vanessa jumps to conclusions. Always has." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "You're uncomfortable." It wasn't a question. "This whole situation makes me uncomfortable," I admitted. Working here, wearing clothes you chose, having a nanny you selected caring for my daughter. It feels like you're taking over my life. I am, he said simply. Until your husband's debt is settled, your life is effectively mine. The bluntness of his statement shocked me into silence. Have you heard from Mike? He asked, changing the subject. I shook my head. Nothing. Would you tell me if you had? I met his gaze steadily. Yes. I told you. I'm not protecting him. Alessandro nodded, seemingly satisfied. There's something you should know, Olivia. Your husband's betrayal wasn't just business. It was personal. What do you mean? He set down his glass and moved around the desk until he stood directly in front of me. Mike worked in my organization for 3 years. I trusted him, gave him opportunities most would never receive. And in return, he not only stole from me, he endangered people I care about. I don't understand. The information he took included details about my family, my sister, my nephew. Alessandro's voice remained calm, but I could see the controlled anger in his eyes. He put a 9-year-old boy at risk. Horror washed through me. Whatever I'd thought of Mike, his gambling, his lies, his unreliability, I'd never imagined him capable of something so despicable. I'm sorry. I had no idea. Meaning, I know. His expression softened slightly. That's why you're here. Working. Instead of, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. I was suddenly acutely aware of his proximity. The subtle scent of his cologne, the intensity of his dark eyes. He was handsome in a dangerous way. The kind of handsome that warned rather than welcomed. You should go home, he said finally. Marco will drive you. I nodded, relieved and strangely disappointed at the dismissal. What about tomorrow? Same time. We'll continue this arrangement until we find your husband. He stepped back, creating distance between us. Good night, Olivia. Days turned into weeks. I settled into a routine that gradually began to feel almost normal. Work at the Crimson 5 nights a week, mornings and afternoons with Emma. Mrs. Garcia became a steady presence in our lives, her warmth and reliability a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. Alessandro and I developed a strange sort of working relationship. Each night, I would report anything unusual I'd noticed, and occasionally he would share small pieces of information about the search for Mike. They'd traced him to Florida, but lost his trail in Miami. They'd frozen accounts he'd tried to access. They were closing in, Alessandro assured me, but I wasn't sure if that was meant to comfort or frighten me. I learned more about Alessandro too, mostly from the staff who had worked for him for years. He had come to America as a teenager, built his business empire from nothing. The restaurant was only one of many enterprises. He was demanding but fair, ruthless with enemies, but generous with friends. He had never married, though there had been women, like Vanessa, who had tried to change that. What no one said, but everyone knew, was that Alessandro Russo wasn't just a successful businessman. The whispers, the deference, the fear, it all painted a clear picture of a man deeply connected to organized crime. Yet the more I learned about him, the harder it became to see him as the villain in my story. He was dangerous, yes, capable of violence, certainly. But there was an integrity to him that Mike had never possessed. One night, about a month into my employment, Alessandro invited me to join him for dinner after my shift ended. It wasn't a request I could refuse, though part of me didn't want to. We sat at his private table, the restaurant empty except for staff cleaning up. He ordered for both of us, a presumption I would have resented from anyone else but had come to expect from him. You're adjusting well, he observed, watching me over the rim of his wineglass. I shrugged. I don't have much choice. We always have choices, Olivia. They're just not always choices we want to make. He studied me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through me. You're different than I expected. What did you expect? Someone weaker. Someone who would beg or cry or run. His lips curved slightly. Instead, you face each day with a quiet strength that's impressive. The compliment, unexpected and seemingly sincere, warmed me more than it should have. I do what I have to for Emma, your daughter. Yes, he nodded. How is she? Good, she likes Mrs. Garcia. I hesitated, then added, "She asks about her father sometimes." Alessandro's expression darkened. "What do you tell her?" "That he's away for work. She's 4. She doesn't need the complicated truth." I took a sip of the wine, rich and velvety, probably costing more than I used to make in a day. "What will happen to him when you find him?" Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. "That depends on several factors. His cooperation, the recovery of what he stole." His eyes met mine. "And perhaps on you." "On me?" I set down my glass. "What do you mean?" "You've proven your value, Olivia, your loyalty, even under difficult circumstances." He leaned forward slightly. "I could use someone like you in my organization permanently. Someone observant, discreet, trustworthy." "I'm a waitress," I said. "A single mom. I'm not cut out for whatever this is." "You underestimate yourself." His hand moved across the table, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. "Think about it. A real future. Security for you and Emma. The offer hung between us, tempting and terrifying." Before I could respond, Marco appeared at Alessandro's side, murmuring something in his ear. Alessandro's expression shifted immediately to one of focused intensity. "We need to go," he said, standing abruptly. "Now, what's happening?" I asked, rising as well. "Your husband has been found." My heart hammered against my ribs as Alessandro guided me firmly toward the exit, his hand at the small of my back. Marco was already outside, holding the door of the SUV open. "Where is he?" I managed to ask as Alessandro ushered me into the vehicle. "Safe house on the outskirts of the city," Alessandro replied, sliding in beside me. His face was set in hard lines, all traces of our earlier conversation erased. He was trying to return to the city. One of my men recognized him at a bus station. The SUV pulled away from the curb, moving swiftly through the late-night traffic. Alessandro made a brief phone call in Italian, his voice low and controlled, but with an undercurrent of tension I hadn't heard before. "What are you going to do to him?" I asked when he ended the call. Alessandro turned to look at me, his dark eyes unreadable in the dim light. "That depends on what he has to say for himself, and on whether he still has what he stole." I swallowed hard, suddenly facing the reality of the situation. For weeks I'd been living in a strange limbo, working for Alessandro, gradually becoming entangled in his world. Now, with Mike's capture, whatever protection that arrangement had provided might disappear. "And what happens to me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro studied me for a long moment. "That," he said slowly, "is entirely up to you." Before I could ask what he meant, the SUV slowed and turned down a long, dark driveway. We pulled up to a modest house set back from the road, surrounded by trees. 2 men stood outside, their stances alert and watchful. "Stay close to me," Alessandro instructed as we exited the vehicle. "Say nothing unless I tell you to speak." I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. Marco moved ahead of us, speaking quietly to the guards. One opened the door, and Alessandro guided me inside, his hand returning to the small of my back, a gesture that felt both possessive and protective. The house was sparsely furnished but clean. We moved through a short hallway into what must have been the living room. And there, sitting on a chair with his hands bound in front of him, was Mike. I almost didn't recognize him. His usually carefully styled hair was disheveled and greasy. A week's worth of stubble covered his face. His eyes, those charming blue eyes that had once made my heart race, were bloodshot and filled with fear. When he saw me, they widened in shock. "Liv?" His voice cracked. "What the hell are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Alessandro stepped forward. "Your wife has been working to pay off your debt, Michael. Something you failed to do." Mike's gaze darted between us, a flash of understanding, and something like disgust crossing his features. "Jesus, Liv, you're sleeping with him? Is that it?" The accusation stung, all the more because it wasn't true. "No," I said coldly. "I've been working at his restaurant trying to clean up your mess, while you abandoned your daughter." "I didn't abandon her. I was trying to protect you both." Mike's voice rose desperately. "This man is dangerous, Liv. You don't know what he's capable of." "I'm learning," I replied quietly, glancing at Alessandro. His face remained impassive, but I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. "Where is it, Michael?" Alessandro asked, his tone conversational but laced with menace. The drive containing my files. Mike licked his lips nervously. I don't have it anymore. I sold the information. Alessandro moved with startling speed. One moment he was beside me. The next he had Mike by the throat, lifting him partially out of the chair. To whom? He demanded, his voice deadly quiet. Donovan, Mike choked out. James Donovan. He paid me $20,000, that's all. Alessandro released him, and Mike collapsed back into the chair, coughing and gasping for air. Donovan, Alessandro repeated, as if testing the name. He turned to Marco. Find him. Marco nodded and stepped outside, phone already in hand. 20,000, Alessandro said, turning back to Mike. You betrayed me, endangered my family, for $20,000. His contempt was palpable. And where is this money now? Mike's eyes dropped. Gone. I had debts, and then I needed to disappear. Alessandro laughed, a sound without humor. So you have nothing. No money, no information, nothing to bargain with. He shook his head. Not very smart, Michael. I watched this exchange with a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing a scene in a movie rather than the potential execution of my husband. The man sitting before us, pathetic and frightened, was so far removed from the charming, confident Mike I'd fallen in love with that he might as well have been a stranger. Please, Mike said, his eyes darting to me. Liv, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I have a family. Alessandro turned to me, eyebrow raised. Yes, Olivia. Tell me about his family. The wife he abandoned, the daughter he left without protection, the home he gambled away. I looked at Mike, really looked at him. Beyond the fear and desperation in his eyes, I saw the selfishness that had always been there, the willingness to sacrifice others for his own benefit. I'd been blind to it for years, making excuses, forgiving the unforgivable. You lied to me, I said quietly, for our entire marriage, about everything. I had to, Liv. You wouldn't have understood. You're right. I wouldn't have understood working for a criminal organization. I wouldn't have understood stealing information that put a child at risk. I wouldn't have understood abandoning your own daughter. My voice grew stronger with each word. But that's on you, Mike. Not me. Mike's face crumpled. So that's it? You're choosing him over me? Your own husband? I'm choosing myself, I replied. And Emma? Alessandro placed a hand on my shoulder. I think it's time you wait outside, Olivia. Marco will stay with you. Fear flashed across Mike's face. No, wait. Liv, don't leave. He's going to kill me. I hesitated, looking up at Alessandro. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes met mine with unexpected gentleness. I won't lie to you, he said quietly. There will be consequences for his actions. But I give you my word. He will have the opportunity to make things right. I believed him, though perhaps I shouldn't have. I nodded once and turned to go. As Marco led me outside, Mike's pleading voice followed me, cutting off only when the door closed behind us. The night air was cool against my skin. I wrapped my arms around myself, trembling not from cold, but from the gravity of what was happening inside that house. He won't kill him, Marco said unexpectedly, his deep voice breaking the silence. When I looked at him in surprise, he shrugged. Not if there's another way. The boss is not unnecessarily cruel. I wasn't sure if that was meant to comfort me, but strangely, it did. We stood in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Finally, the door opened, and Alessandro emerged, alone. It's done, he said simply. Is he... I couldn't finish the question. Alive? Yes. Alessandro adjusted his cuffs, a gesture so normal it seemed out of place in the circumstances. He's agreed to help recover the information from Donovan. If he succeeds, his debt will be considered paid. Relief washed through me, not because I cared what happened to Mike, I realized with a jolt, but because I was glad Alessandro hadn't killed him. Glad he hadn't crossed that line, at least not tonight. And if he fails? I asked. Alessandro's eyes met mine. Then his debt remains, but it will no longer be your burden to bear. The drive back to the city was silent. I stared out the window, watching the darkened landscape slip by, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. Alessandro sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders occasionally brushed when the car turned. Each contact sent a current through me that I could no longer deny. When we reached my apartment building, Alessandro surprised me by exiting the car with me. "I'll see you to your door," he said, in a tone that brooked no argument. We rode the elevator in silence. The hallway to my apartment had never seemed so long. At my door, I fumbled with my keys, suddenly nervous. "Thank you," I said, turning to face him, "for not killing him." Alessandro's lips curved slightly. "Is that what you think happened tonight, that I spared his life for you? Didn't you?" He moved closer, his proximity making my pulse quicken. "Your husband will live or die by his own actions, Olivia. That was always the case. Then why am I here? Why involve me at all? Initially, because you contacted me, because you were a way to find him." His voice dropped lower. "But now you're here because I want you to be." The admission hung between us, charged and dangerous. I should have been afraid. I should have opened my door and fled inside. Instead, I stood my ground, meeting his gaze. "What does that mean, Alessandro?" He reached out slowly, giving me time to step away. When I didn't, his hand cupped my cheek, his touch unexpectedly gentle. "It means I see you, Olivia, your strength, your loyalty, misplaced as it was with your husband, your fierce protection of your daughter." His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I found myself leaning into his touch. "These are qualities I value, qualities I admire. I'm still married," I whispered, though in my heart, my marriage had ended long before tonight. "A technicality that can be addressed," Alessandro replied. His hand dropped away, and I immediately missed his touch. "But not tonight. Tonight you should rest. Be with your daughter. Tomorrow, we'll talk about your future." He stepped back, creating space between us. "Good night, Olivia." I watched him walk away, my emotions a confusing tangle of relief, uncertainty, and something else. Something that felt dangerously like desire. Only when he disappeared into the elevator did I finally enter my apartment. Mrs. Garcia had fallen asleep on the couch, a book open on her lap. She woke as I closed the door, quickly gathering her things and assuring me that Emma had been a perfect angel. I thanked her and saw her out, then went to check on my sleeping daughter. Emma lay curled around her stuffed bear, her face peaceful in sleep. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, overwhelmed by love for her. Whatever happened next, whatever decisions I made, they would be for her. To give her safety, stability, the life she deserved. I changed out of my dress and into comfortable pajamas, removing all traces of the crimson. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't remove the memory of Alessandro's touch, the intensity of his gaze, the promise of tomorrow's conversation. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "Sleep well, Olivia. Your husband is cooperating. Tomorrow, we begin a new chapter." I closed my eyes, letting exhaustion finally claim me. But not before acknowledging a truth I'd been fighting for weeks. My life had become irrevocably entangled with Alessandro Russo's, and part of me didn't want to escape. 3 days passed with no word from Alessandro. The Crimson was unexpectedly closed for renovations, according to the sign on the door. Mrs. Garcia still arrived each evening, explaining that Mr. Russo had instructed her to continue caring for Emma regardless of whether I was working. I spent those days in a state of anxious anticipation, jumping every time my phone buzzed, checking the window whenever a car slowed outside our building. I told myself I was worried about Mike, about the resolution of his debt. But the truth, which I finally admitted in the dark hours of the third night, was that I missed Alessandro, missed his presence, his intensity, the way he made me feel seen in a way no one, certainly not Mike, ever had. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Olivia." Alessandro's voice, deep and familiar, sent a jolt through me. "Are you well?" "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's happening? Is Mike—" "The situation is being handled," he interrupted. "I need you to pack a bag for yourself and Emma. Enough for a few days. Be ready in 1 hour." My pulse quickened. "Why? What's wrong?" Nothing is wrong, he assured me. But Donovan has become aware of our interest in recovering the information. It's safer if you and Emma are not at your apartment for a while. The implication was clear. We might be in danger. I thought of my daughter, innocent and vulnerable, and felt a surge of protective fear. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere safe. 1 hour, Olivia. He ended the call before I could ask more questions. I moved quickly, packing essentials for Emma and myself, my mind racing with possibilities. Part of me wondered if this was a trap, if Alessandro had decided we were liabilities after all. But a stronger instinct told me to trust him. Whatever else he might be, Alessandro Russo had been honest with me from the beginning. Exactly 1 hour later, a black SUV pulled up outside. It wasn't Marco driving this time, but a younger man who introduced himself as Paolo. The drive took us out of the city, through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, until we turned through an ornate iron gate set in a high stone wall. Beyond stretched manicured grounds leading to a large Mediterranean-style mansion. Is this... I began, unable to finish the question. Paolo nodded. Mr. Russo's home. He's waiting for you inside. Emma, excited by the adventure, tugged at my hand as we approached the imposing front door. It opened before we reached it, revealing a slim, elegant woman in her 50s. You must be Olivia, she said, her accent similar to Alessandro's but softer. And this beautiful girl is Emma. I'm Maria, Alessandro's housekeeper. Come, he's in his study. We followed her through a grand foyer into a home that managed to be both luxurious and tasteful. Nothing ostentatious, just quality everywhere you looked. Maria led us to a heavy wooden door, knocked once, then ushered us inside. Alessandro stood at a large window overlooking the grounds, his back to us. He turned as we entered, and I was struck again by his commanding presence. He'd rolled the sleeves of his crisp white shirt to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. His expression softened when he saw Emma half hiding behind my legs. Thank you for coming, he said, approaching us slowly. He crouched down to Emma's level, his movements careful, non-threatening. You must be Emma. I've heard so much about you, my daughter, usually shy with strangers, especially men. Surprised me by stepping forward. Are you my mommy's boss? She asked bluntly. A smile touched Alessandro's lips. Something like that. I'm Alessandro. Emma considered this. That's a long name. Yes, it is. My friends call me Alex. Can I call you Alex? His smile widened. I would be honored. He straightened, addressing me now. Maria will show you to your rooms. You'll be staying in the East Wing, complete privacy, but with security nearby at all times. How long will we be here? I asked. Until it's safe to return, he replied simply. We should know more tonight. Donovan has agreed to a meeting. And Mike? Alessandro's expression hardened slightly. Is fulfilling his part of our arrangement. Don't worry about your husband, Olivia. Focus on keeping yourself and Emma comfortable. Maria led us to a beautiful suite of rooms. A large bedroom for me, connected to a smaller one for Emma, plus a shared sitting area and bathroom. Everything was exquisitely decorated in soothing creams and blues. Fresh flowers sat on every surface, and a selection of toys and books had been thoughtfully arranged in Emma's room. Alessandro requested these specifically for the little one, Maria explained, seeing my surprise. He wanted her to feel at home. The thought of Alessandro Russo, feared Mafia boss, personally selecting stuffed animals and picture books for my daughter created a strange warmth in my chest. Emma, delighted with her temporary kingdom, immediately began exploring the treasures. Mr. Russo has asked that you join him for dinner, Maria added. At 7. I can watch Emma if you like. I agreed, grateful for the opportunity to speak with Alessandro alone. The rest of the day passed pleasantly, with Emma enchanted by the gardens and the small indoor pool Maria showed us. By the time evening approached, my initial fear had been replaced by curiosity and that same strange anticipation I'd felt in Alessandro's presence before. I dressed carefully in one of the dresses he'd chosen for me at the boutique, applied light makeup, and left Emma happily playing a board game with Maria. A different staff member led me to a smaller, more intimate dining room than I'd expected, where Alessandro waited alone. He rose as I entered, his dark eyes moving appreciatively over me. "You look beautiful, Olivia." "Thank you," I replied, taking the seat he held out for me. "Your home is amazing." "It's just a house," he said, resuming his own seat. "One of several I maintain." "For security?" He nodded, pouring wine for both of us. "Among other reasons." "How is Emma settling in?" "She's in heaven," I admitted. "The toys, the pool, she thinks we're on vacation." "And you?" His gaze held mine over the rim of his glass. "What do you think?" I considered the question carefully. "I think you brought us here to protect us. What I don't understand is why. Isn't it obvious?" Alessandro set down his glass. "You've become important to me." The simple admission sent a flutter through my stomach. "Because I'm useful to you? Because I'm helping you find Mike?" "No." His voice was firm. "Because you're extraordinary, Olivia. Your strength, your dignity in impossible circumstances, your devotion to your daughter, from the moment you stood in the rain outside your apartment building, refusing to get in my car until you had answers. I've been—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Intrigued." Heat rose to my cheeks under his intense gaze. "I'm just doing what I have to do, which is exactly what makes you extraordinary." He leaned forward slightly. "Most people, when faced with danger, either crumble or run. You stood your ground. You negotiated, even when you had no leverage. You protected what was yours." I looked down, uncomfortable with his praise. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Olivia. It's acting despite it. His hand moved across the table, covering mine. Unlike before, this time he didn't hesitate to touch me. And now I find myself in the unexpected position of wanting to protect what's yours, because I've begun to think of it as mine as well. My heart raced at his words, at the possessive curl of his fingers around mine. "We don't belong to you, Alessandro." "Don't you?" His thumb traced circles on my palm. "You've been in my world for over a month now. You've seen who I am, what I do. And yet you're here, sitting across from me, looking at me not with fear but with something else entirely." He was right. What I felt when I looked at him wasn't fear. It was attraction, fascination, a dangerous pull toward something I knew should frighten me but didn't. "What happens when this is over?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "When you get back what Mike stole, do Emma and I just go back to our lives?" Alessandro's eyes darkened. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want anymore," I admitted. "Except that I want Emma to be safe, to have stability." "And what about you, Olivia? What do you want for yourself?" The question caught me off guard. For so long, my wants and needs had been secondary to survival, to Emma's well-being. What did I want? Security, yes, but also more. Connection, passion. Someone who saw me as Alessandro did. Before I could answer, a knock at the door interrupted us. Marco entered, his expression grave. "It's time, boss. The meeting with Donovan is set." Alessandro released my hand reluctantly. "I have to go. We'll continue this conversation when I return." He stood, adjusting his suit jacket. "You and Emma will stay here tonight. I've doubled security on the property. No one gets in or out without my authorization." Fear gripped me suddenly. "Is it dangerous, this meeting?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Most things worth doing involve some element of risk." He moved around the table to stand before me, then bent down, and, to my surprise, pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. "Wait for me, Olivia." I watched him leave with Marco, an inexplicable dread settling in my stomach. Whatever was happening tonight would determine all our fates, Mike's, Alessandro's, mine, and Emma's. I barely slept that night, checking my phone obsessively for messages, listening for sounds of Alessandro's return. Emma, blissfully unaware, slept peacefully in her adjoining room, surrounded by new toys. I envied her innocence, her ability to trust that tomorrow would be better than today. Dawn broke with no word from Alessandro. Maria brought breakfast, her tight smile telling me she was as concerned as I was. By mid-morning, my anxiety had reached fever pitch. Then, finally, the sound of cars on the driveway. I rushed to the window to see 2 black SUVs pulling up to the house. Maria appeared at my door. "Mr. Russo has returned. He's asking for you in his study." I followed her quickly, heart pounding. When she opened the study door, I braced myself for the worst. But Alessandro stood alone by his desk, looking tired but unharmed. Relief flooded through me, so intense I nearly stumbled. "It's done," he said simply. "The information, you got it back?" He nodded. Donovan was persuaded to return what wasn't his. I didn't ask how that persuasion had taken place. Some details were better left unknown. "And Mike?" Alessandro's expression revealed nothing. "Your husband fulfilled his part of our agreement. He's no longer in my debt." "Is he alive?" I held my breath, not sure which answer I wanted to hear. "Yes," Alessandro said after a moment. "He's been given money and a plane ticket to the West Coast, with the strong suggestion that he not return. The divorce papers have been drawn up. All he needs to do is sign them." My mouth fell open in shock. "Divorce papers? But I never—" "I took the liberty," Alessandro interrupted smoothly. "It seemed the logical next step, given the circumstances. Of course, if you wish to remain married to a man who betrayed and abandoned you, who put his daughter in danger—" "No," I said quickly. "I don't, but this is all happening so fast." Alessandro moved toward me, stopping when only inches separated us. "Life changes in an instant, Olivia. One moment, you're a waitress struggling to make ends meet. The next, you're texting a man like me." His hand came up to cut my cheek. One wrong number that turned out to be exactly right. I leaned into his touch, no longer fighting the attraction between us. "What happens now?" "That depends on you." His dark eyes held mine, intense but gentle. "I want you in my life, Olivia, you and Emma. Not as employees or obligations, but as—" He hesitated, then finished, "as family." The word hung between us, weighted with meaning. "Are you offering me a job or a relationship?" I asked, needing clarity. A smile touched his lips. "Both. All. Everything." His thumb traced my lower lip. "I'm not a simple man, Olivia. My life is complex, sometimes dangerous. But with me, you and Emma would want for nothing. Protection, security, comfort? Yes. But also respect, partnership, and this." His lips replaced his thumb, pressing against mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened, revealing the passion he'd kept leashed until now. I responded without hesitation, my hands moving to his shoulders, then sliding up to the nape of his neck. His arms encircled me, pulling me flush against him. The kiss was everything I'd secretly imagined and more, powerful, consuming, a perfect balance of strength and tenderness. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, I saw vulnerability in his eyes that he'd never shown before. "Say yes, Olivia," he murmured against my lips. "Stay with me. Let me take care of you both." "Yes," I whispered, the decision feeling both momentous and inevitable. "Yes." His smile was transformative, softening his entire face. He kissed me again, briefly but with promise, before stepping back. "There's someone else you should meet," he said, moving to the door. He opened it to reveal a dark-haired woman in her 30s, elegant and beautiful, with Alessandro's eyes. "Olivia, this is my sister, Sophia. She's been eager to meet you." I recognized her immediately as the head hostess from the Crimson, though she looked different outside the restaurant, warmer somehow. "You were watching me," I realized. "At the restaurant." Sophia smiled. "My brother asked me to assess you, to see if you were trustworthy." She stepped forward, taking my hands in hers. "I told him you were worth pursuing, but I didn't expect him to fall in love quite so thoroughly." I glanced at Alessandro, who actually looked somewhat embarrassed. "Sophia exaggerates," he said, though his eyes told a different story. "I never exaggerate," his sister countered, "especially about matters of the heart." She squeezed my hands. "Welcome to the family, Olivia. I look forward to meeting your daughter." After she left, Alessandro drew me back into his arms. "My sister approves," he murmured. "That's rare." "I'm still trying to process everything," I admitted. "A month ago, you were threatening me. Now I'm offering you the world," he finished. "On one condition." "What's that?" "No more texting other men," he said with mock seriousness. accidentally or otherwise. I laughed, the sound foreign to my ears after weeks of tension and fear. I think I can manage that. 6 months later, Emma and I were fully settled in Alessandro's home. Our home. The divorce from Mike had been finalized quickly, with him signing away all parental rights in exchange for a generous settlement that Alessandro insisted on providing to ensure he stays far away. Emma had adapted with the resilience of childhood, calling Alessandro Alex, and delighting in his attention. He surprised me daily with his patience with her, his willingness to sit through tea parties and bedtime stories with the same focus he gave to his business dealings. As for me, I'd found my place both in his home and in his organization. I now managed the Crimson officially, discovering a talent for business I'd never had the opportunity to develop before. Alessandro respected my independence while providing the security I'd always craved. And at night, in our shared bedroom, I discovered passion I'd never imagined existed. Alessandro was as intense and commanding in our intimate moments as he was in business, but always with an underlying tenderness that was for me alone. We married in a small ceremony on the grounds of our home, with Emma as flower girl and Sophia as my maid of honor. As Alessandro slid the ring onto my finger, far more extravagant than the cheap band Mike had given me, he whispered words meant only for me. "From the moment you texted me by mistake, you were mine. And I was yours." Life with Alessandro wasn't always easy. His business sometimes took him away for days. There were moments of danger, late-night meetings, occasional threats that required increased security. But through it all, he remained honest with me, never shielding me from the reality of who he was, while ensuring Emma remained innocent and protected. I sometimes thought about how it all began. With a wrong number, a desperate text, a rainy